Hi everyone, this is Sally Fowler with Disabled Advantage. Thank you for joining me on my Patreon tier Service Dog Questions Answered. Today's question is, what are the ups and downs of public attention when partnered with a service dog? Public attention it's part of the package deal, unfortunately. This odd effect happens when you go into a store with a dog and the store is not pet friendly. Immediately it's almost as if your dog has been transformed into a unicorn or a dragon or some other mythical creature that no one's seen before. And sometimes that leads people to stare at you, point at you, or come up and try and interact with your mythical creature, or talk to you or feed it. All sorts of things have happened to different teams regarding public attention. But it's not all bad. And so what I want to focus on today is that there are positive sides to public attention, but there are also downsides to public attention. And I feel like, first of all, in talking to people who are outside the service dog community, most people seem to largely be unaware of just what service dog teams have to be trained to tolerate when they go out in public. And most other trainers seem to understand that, yeah, one of the risks of taking your service dog out in public is that they might get rushed by an off-leash dog or an out-of-control dog on leash, but they don't really go past that. And a lot of teams have had a lot of different things happen to them. One team I've spoken with had someone follow them around with a camera without permission. Another team, teams have had their dogs get hugged. Teams have had their dogs be followed by store members or random strangers. People try to feed their dogs. We had someone in a pet store once. He was carrying an iguana or some other type of large lizard on his shoulder, and he took it off his shoulder and shoved it in Robbie's face, which shows a lack of impulse control and respect for so many of the animals involved in that, because he didn't know that Robbie wasn't going to eat his lizard. And Robbie just kind of looked at us like, this is weird. But thankfully, we'd done a lot of work with Robbie around animals to make sure that he was just gonna sit there and kind of be okay with whatever happened. Probably the most surprising thing is how many people come up and interact with the dog without our permission. And it's not just isolated to kids, it's also adults who come up and interact with your dog without permission. And so it's really all over the map. And public attention is something that I feel like it's really, really important for owner trainers, especially, to understand that you have to train your dog to be ready for public attention. So that takes a lot of front-end preparation. It's not just about teaching the dog sit and down and come and leave it and their tasks. You also have to spend a great deal of time socializing them to the world, but also preparing them for dumb stuff that might happen in public. One of the things I do as part of my dog's finishing training is, once they've learned a command and they're really good at it, I test it by throwing things past them or running past them or having my friend run past them while throwing dog toys. Because they have to be prepared for anything. I also test my dogs against fireworks and random loud noises and smoke alarms and just anything I can possibly imagine. But that's just the stimuli of public attention. There's also preparing your dog for handling it when somebody randomly comes up and hugs them, or grabs their tail, or pulls on their ears, or gets in their personal space bubble. And the list goes on. And it is something that you also need to have a certain measure of confidence to be able to handle. How are you going to handle it if somebody comes up and demands to pet your dog? How are you going to handle it if somebody comes up and just starts interacting with your dog? How are you going to handle it if somebody tries to feed your dog? How are you going to handle it if someone tries to hurt your service dog, or your service dog in training? And I wish that one wasn't on the list, but it is, because a few years back, I was standing in a checkout line in Walmart with Robbie, and my husband was in between me and the people behind us. And I didn't really like the way the guys were looking at me and Robbie. I felt something was off. I didn't feel quite safe. But I couldn't hear what they were saying. They just kept pointing at Robbie and laughing to themselves. But my husband's body language changed, and he stood in more of a defensive position beside us, and we left as quickly as possible. And when we were going out to the parking lot, he told me that the guys were... I mentioned that I had kind of an off vibe about those guys, and he validated it by saying that the guys were making jokes about what might happen if one of them came up and started kicking Robbie, if Robbie was going to attack them or not. And when I heard that, I got a very sick feeling. And it's still a difficult memory. I'm grateful that nothing actually happened, that they didn't have the courage and the stupidity to actually try that. But that is a potential risk of going out in public. And it's a situation where you need to mentally prepare yourself for, how might I handle that when I'm working with a service dog in public? And when you're dealing with public attention, and I am going to have a post later that goes into more detail about how to train for public attention, but I just want to give an overview real quick. When you're thinking about training a service dog, one of the questions you need to ask yourself is, do I have social anxiety? Because if you do, the follow-up question of that is, do I feel confident in my ability to advocate for a service dog and in my ability to make myself go to public places in order to directly interact with the public for the benefit of training my service dog how to handle public attention, and to go into public to teach my dog how to ignore public attention and things that happen in public? And does my disability allow for that level of work and that level of interaction with the world? And it might be that if you answer no to those questions, it may very well be that that's a sign to you that you need to start with a program dog as opposed to a dog that you train yourself. My disability is caused by complex regional pain syndrome, which does make going out in public very difficult and overwhelming at times. However, given my status of not being able to drive due to disability, I'm always with usually my husband or my best friend. And so when I am out training in public, I have them to help me, and they can help, find people who are willing to participate in training exercises, and they can also be a perimeter. They keep a lookout for potential risks like dogs coming up to us or people making a beeline for us. And they kind of act as a go-between so that I can focus on the dog. So that's how I handle going to difficult places while being disabled, and training a dog. But it is something that you need to consider before you make that choice. What are the ups and downs of public attention when partnered with a service dog? And some of these are going to be the ups and downs of when you train your own, and some of them will be relevant whether you have a dog that you're training yourself or you got a program dog. Let's focus on the upsides first. So the upsides of public attention is that it gives you lots of opportunities to teach your dog how to ignore people. And sometimes this can be a structured exercise that you set up. If you train with me, it absolutely is a structured exercise. I'll give you step-by-step instructions for teaching this. But even if you're training by yourself on the fly, every single time someone tries to interact with your dog, that's an opportunity for you to pause and teach your dog in the moment how you want them to respond. Whether it's you get out your treats and you ask for a focus, or you use a leave it command, you remind your dog to sit, whatever you've decided you want your dog to do in that situation. Don't worry about the other person. They are not as important as your service dog is. And that sounds harsh. And there are people who will not take kindly to that. But what's most important is that your service dog learns how to ignore people coming up to them and other dogs coming up to them so that they can focus on you, so that they don't miss signs for tasks. Especially if you have a medical alert dog, if they're too distracted, they will miss signs that you're about to go into distress and need assistance. And that can be extremely dangerous for you. Depending on your condition, it can end you up in the hospital or potentially be fatal depending on what your condition is. In my situation, probably not fatal if my dog misses a cue, but annoying, definitely, and painful for sure. And if your dog is, there's some dogs who just love everybody, but if your dog is too happy about all of the people, so much so that they want to be friends with everybody and you quickly become on the back burner, essentially, that is a reason to wash a dog out of training. And it seems ridiculous, but your service dog needs to be able to prioritize you above the attention of strangers. And if they can't do that, they can't be a service dog. But fortunately, a lot of people don't necessarily know how to behave around service dogs in public. So when they see one, they want to come up, they want to talk to you, they want to learn about it, they want to interact with the dog, and that's its own deal. But when people come up and try to interact with you, it's an opportunity. Is it annoying? Sometimes. Does it slow your day down? Yes, we'll get to that. But it is an opportunity. And more people are learning about service dogs, which is awesome. So it seems to be in some places, people are really respectful of teams, and in other places, they're less respectful of teams. But I don't want you to necessarily see people coming up to you as a bad thing. It's very hard for some teams to manufacture training exercises depending on their resources. You never know if somebody's going to come up to you in your team or not. And so when that opportunity presents itself, take advantage of it. Use that moment to teach your dog or to reinforce to your dog how you want them to act. Another upside of public attention is that it's an opportunity to teach your dog about weird situations. And I say weird because it's a very broad category. To us, firefighters, people in uniform, mascots, costumes aren't necessarily weird. Sometimes mascots get a little strange, but overall, in our culture, we accept them as normal. To your dog, they probably look weird. So going out into public and interacting with the public is a good way to help prepare your dog for seeing firefighters in bunker gear, or seeing police officers in uniforms, seeing doctors with masks on, seeing a mascot moving around, seeing people with face paint, things like that, and teaching them how you want them to respond and testing the waters. Unless you have a lot of hobbies and a lot of skills, you probably don't have bunker gear, various uniforms, and a mascot outfit and a bunch of different costumes in your house that you can dress up in to train your service dog around. And if you do, that's very interesting. But even if you do, your dog, if they're smart, which hopefully being a service dog, they definitely need to be smart. Your dog will probably learn that it's you. And at that point, you need to expand that out to other people. Most people don't have that in their closet. So we train it by exposing the dog to that environment. I had the opportunity to, there's an event in our town called Tons of Trucks. And it's a wonderful event that's designed for children, but it's especially designed for children who have sensory difficulties. And it's a parking lot filled with different types of trucks: construction trucks, ambulances, fire trucks, construction trucks, all sorts of trucks. And the point of it is to give kids an opportunity to interact with firefighters, interact with police officers, interact with paramedics, interact with construction crew people, and so on, when there's not a high stress environment going on. So it gives a kid a chance to see a firefighter before they're in a fire and in a high stress situation. And it lets them explore the truck and see what it's like, and it makes everything just a little less scary if they're ever in a situation where they do have to be in an ambulance or something like that. And then also it's just the other trucks come because they do cool stuff. And so it's a really fun learning opportunity. And we've been taking the dogs to it for the last 2 years because it's pet friendly. And I mean, my dog would be able to go regardless, but my friend's dog is not a service dog. We've been going for the last 2 years so that we can maintain their socialization training to large crowds, bunch of different noises, kids, and the firefighters. The photo on this screen on the far right is of Austin meeting a firefighter in bunker gear. One of the firefighters had volunteered to put on the bunker gear for a very short amount of time because it's very hot equipment. And I went up to him and I said, "Hey, I'm training this guy to be a service dog for myself, and he needs to be okay with people in all different types of uniforms. Would you mind interacting with him a little bit? Just talking to him and petting him." And I was able to tell him exactly what I needed him to do. And then while he interacted with Austin, I was able to read Austin's body language, see that he was okay with it, reward him, hold him the way I needed him to be interacting. I just asked Austin to stand there and interact with him. Otherwise, in other situations, I might ask Austin to sit or lay down. but it really just depends on the situation. The firefighter was more than happy to help out. He enjoyed the experience. Austin thought it was great fun, wasn't fazed by it at all. And that was a really good sign for me. Now, if Austin had tried to run backwards or cowered or refused to interact with the firefighter, that would have been a sign for me that, hey, I need to work with this more, and this might be a disqualification for him being a service dog. It seems like an isolated incident, but there are a lot of different scenarios where your dog might encounter someone in a mask, or someone who talks funny, or someone who moves differently. And the truth of it is, if he had reacted weirdly, I wouldn't have known. I wouldn't have been able to ask him, hey, buddy, what exactly about this bothers you? So I know what to work on, right? So I would have then had to go and find different elements of that and train all of them until I figured out which part was bothering Austin. And then I would have had to determine, okay, is this a deal breaker or can we work with this? Sometimes it's a deal breaker. Sometimes you can work with it. Ultimately, it does depend on how much you're going to find that in the real world. You're more likely to find someone wearing a mask and talking a little weird and moving a little oddly than you are to constantly run into mascots. I can't go to sporting events because they're too loud for me. So mascots are very far and few between for me. Austin's first mascot was this year, actually. At an event I was working for Disabled Advantage, I saw a mascot came with another one of the vendors, and so I took a break from my booth and left my husband in charge so that I could go real quickly train Austin around a mascot. And he did great. He was a little confused, but very playful and just wanted to be friends with the giant tiger squirrel mascot. Robbie, on the other hand, met the Chick-fil-A cow and did not want anything to do with it, was very uncertain about life, and it was written down as we should try to work on this, but I don't know where we can work on this. And we didn't wash Robbie because I'm never around mascots. And so we just tried to keep that in mind of like when we made plans to go places in the future, is there a chance we're going to run into a mascot? Here's how we'll handle it, sort of thing. So going in public and people who want to interact with a service dog team and who want to help train a service dog team gives you a wonderful opportunity to let the public engage with the mythical creature, but in a way that works for your team, and weird opportunities are great for that. Another great source for that are college campuses. Usually, I won't say usually, in our experience, college campuses, public college campuses are plentiful in students who understand what a service dog is and who want to help with various exercises. We've been able to recruit college students on numerous occasions to, walk past and totally ignore him, or walk past and do a drive-by pet. We were walking on campus one evening and there was a guy in a shark costume. Randomly, it was not Halloween. And we were able to say, hey, like, we're training a service dog. Can you come pet him? Because we haven't found a mascot yet. But costumes are weird. And he was all about it. He was so excited to get to pet the dog and interact with him and be helping to train a dog. And that was pretty cool. If you are going to go train on a college campus, you want to make sure that that's something that's going to be okay, that you're not going to be, different campuses have different rules regarding visitors. And so that is something you want to check into and be mindful of before you just make assumptions about going there. Public attention gives you the opportunity to teach a visit cue if you would like to teach one, and also to teach the dog that they have to wait for the visit cue, meaning that sometimes I'm going to give this cue and sometimes you're not going to get to say hi to anybody today, which is a really important part of teaching the visit cue. Some teams say greet, we use visit. It doesn't sound like any other word that we use, and we don't use it in common conversation. So it's very isolated to direct the dog that they can go visit with someone, but then they can interact with someone for about 30 seconds, but then they need to return to us or return to me and sit down and be calm again and go back to ignoring the world, kind of like flipping a switch. Some teams choose to never let their service dog interact with other people. And I do recommend that for medical alert dogs. And I do recommend that for dogs who have a tendency to love all of the people. Robbie got to do more visits than Austin does because Austin is kind of borderline on loving all of the people too much. And there's been a few times where he has made mistakes in public because he got too excited about the possibility of maybe getting interest from other people. And the only reason it works is that he does still prioritize me over other people. But we limit visit cues to days when I'm feeling pretty good, or if we have someone if we're having a slow errand day and we have someone who's very, very polite about, respectful to me and respectful of my service dog and asking questions. And if I'm feeling up for teaching and interacting with people, I might let Austin or Robbie say hi and then come back to me. But it's usually very brief. I only do it with people. I don't do it with other people's dogs because meeting dogs on leash is a recipe for disaster. And we also do plenty of work where you don't get to visit with someone. And we also do a lot of work with people who are going to pet you, but you're not allowed to interact with them back. And that was hard for Robbie to learn, and it was extremely hard for Austin to learn because as soon as someone pets him, he wants to immediately engage with them. And so teaching that was really difficult and continues to be difficult some days, depending on what mindset hat Austin's wearing. Another upside of public attention is that it is an opportunity to teach your dog how to be calm around children. I typically advise people work on training exercises around kids and then work on having kids interact with your dog. Because then you're prioritizing the dog focusing on you and working with you over getting to interact with children. But how you go about doing it really depends. Given Robbie's supremely calm nature, I was usually able to leave Robbie in a sit and let kids interact with him, and he was very good at being calm. It was part of his natural setup, and he learned to be calm with me. And Robbie was very good at, I'm in public, I'm in work mode, and his work mode was very low drive. Austin loves people. He loves kids. Robbie loved kids too. He'd start wagging his tail every time he saw a kid, and good wagging tail. But Austin is so big that he's the height of most 2 or 3 year olds. And to help encourage him to be calmer and to help kids feel safer. I almost always have Austin either lay down or have him sit with his back to kids so that he's a little less threatening and they can interact with him. And so that he stays a little bit calmer as well. And most of that work's been done at events, teaching kids safety about how to pet dogs safely and interact with dogs safely. But some of it is also done at the local park or with family members. The final upside of public attention is that it's an opportunity for you to learn how to advocate for you and how to advocate for your service dog. And it also teaches you how to talk to strangers, which can be terrifying and very stressful, even if you're an outgoing person. Because sometimes you have to go up to complete strangers and say, hey, I'm training a service dog. Do you have a moment of your day that you can help participate in a training exercise? It will take 30 seconds or less. And they're going to say, yeah, absolutely. Or they're going to look at you very weirdly and say, no, and then keep going. And you have to be okay with that. So there's that. And then there's also, you get the opportunity to practice over and over and over again how to advocate for yourself. When I first started working with Robbie, I was really bad at this. People would come up to me and say, oh, it's so great that you're training a dog for some poor veteran or child. And I was so embarrassed. I felt so put on the spot that I didn't look disabled enough to be worthy of needing a service dog, that I would just kind of say, yep, he's coming along. He's going to be a great service dog. And then I would beat myself up about it later because I just felt really crappy about myself. And the more it happened to me, the more I got better at saying, actually, he's my service dog in training. I have a neurological disability. And I didn't have to tell them that, but I set out to train Robbie, and then it became, I'm going to share as much about this as I can. I'm going to be an advocate for CRPS and an advocate for service dogs, and now I'm running a business. And so teaching the public has just sort of become second nature for me. You absolutely do not have to tell people what your condition is. They do not have a right to know. If a business asks, you can say, yes, I have a disability. Yes, the service dog is needed because of a disability. They do mobility or they do medical alert, and that's the end of it. But the more people talked to me, the more confident I got about saying what was going on or sharing a little bit about what my team was, or asking for their help doing a training exercise, or saying, oh, please don't touch him, he's working. Please don't let your dog come up. He's a service dog, he's working. And that also carried over into helping me better articulate and advocate for myself when I was talking to other people, be it family members or friends or doctors or other strangers in my life that I encountered. I had so many instances of needing to talk to strangers while I was training Robbie that I can't even count them and remember them all. But every opportunity was an opportunity to learn. And that's the biggest takeaway that I want you to think about for public attention, is that every opportunity you and your team experience, be it in training or be it once your team is finished training and you're out working in the public world, every opportunity is a moment to learn. Learn something good, learn something bad, but you learned something. And it's also an opportunity to teach. So you can take that opportunity and you can use it to make your dog better and make yourself better, or you can ignore and dismiss those opportunities, and your dog might lose some of their skills and you might lose some of your skills because you're not practicing it as much as you were when you were first training the dog or when you first got the dog. And something that a lot of people seem to forget is that your service dog is not going to last forever. And so you're going to have to do this again in like 9 or 10 years. And if you haven't been consistently practicing it for the last 9 or 10 years, it's going to be a huge shock to your system when it comes around again and you have to get back in the swing of doing it. So while public attention has its downsides, which I'm about to get into, there are plenty of positives that you can use to your advantage when training your service dog. So let's talk about the downsides, because there's a lot of them. Public attention is definitely one of the harder aspects of working with a service dog, because first of all, you have the mythical creature. And second of all, the prevailing notion is that it's fantastic to get to take your dog everywhere. And it's not. And this is not related to public attention, but it is related to why it's not always fantastic to get to take your dog everywhere. And by get, I mean have to, because you're disabled. I went to an event last week and I had to go to the bathroom, which normally would not be a concern because Austin is trained to help me get off the toilet and navigate stairs and doors and things like that. But I go into the bathroom and I'm the only person in there, and there are no handicap accessible stalls. And Austin is huge. He's not as big as some service dogs are, but he's still quite large, and I didn't like trying to fit Robbie into non-accessible bathroom stalls, and Austin is 20% bigger than Robbie was and wider than Robbie was. And so I managed to back Austin into that tiny slot between the bathroom stall wall and the toilet. And as I was sitting there with us basically crammed into a broom closet together, I thought to myself, yeah, it's fantastic getting to take your dog everywhere. So most people don't really get what it's like to have to take a dog with you everywhere because you rely on them for medical assistance and basic human life functionality. And that's very present when the public interacts with you probably about 60% of the time. Like I said, it very much depends on where you are, even down to what store you're in. It varies wildly. The public is not all bad, but it is something you need to prepare yourself for. One of the downs of public attention is that it's very distracting for your dog. Your dog has the opportunity to miss task cues or miss command cues, meaning you have to give them repeatedly, which is more exhaustive for you. And as I mentioned earlier, it can be downright dangerous for you depending on your disability. You can predict what the public is going to do, but you never really know until you're in it. I've had other people hug the dog, pull the tail, chase us through a store, get in our personal space, try to feed the dog, shove animals in my dog's face, throw toys for my dog, be playing fetch in Home Depot, off leash, while me and my service dog are walking down the aisle, and just all sorts of stuff. So you never know what the public's going to do, but you have to train your dog to be able to ignore pretty much everything. And that's really hard. That takes a lot of time. And sometimes you're still going to be met with people doing random stuff. and you're just going to have to hope that your dog is with it enough to ignore whatever craziness is happening. Public attention generally will slow you down. A grocery trip run that should have taken 30 minutes might end up taking 45 minutes. And part of that is, unloading the dog from your car, getting them in their gear, whatever your setup is. But a good deal of it is also having to stop and talk to people when they say, oh, your dog looks just like my friend's cousin's brother's dog. Or I had a dog like that, but he died. Or, oh, it must be so wonderful to take your dog out in public. What's wrong with you? Can I pet your dog? Why won't you let me pet your dog? Your dog's wearing shoes? How did you get your dog to wear shoes? That is such a cool vest. Where can I get one? How did you train your dog? Where did you get your dog? How old is your dog? What's your dog's name? And the questions go on. And every team handles it differently. Sometimes we just smile and nod and keep walking. Other times we stop and talk to people. It also depends, like if we're in a checkout line, we're kind of stuck there talking to people. And I've had tons of great conversations with people in the checkout line about my service dog. It's not all bad, but it definitely does slow you down sometimes. And it can be worse when you're by yourself. Because there is no go-between. And people feel a little bit more emboldened to approach one person with a dog than they do 2 or 3 people with a dog. Public attention kind of puts you on display. That's one of the weirder feelings. I don't feel it as much anymore, but I do when I go to new places or when I go to events. I feel kind of like I'm on display. I'm expecting people to stare at me. It's a very vulnerable feeling the first few times you go out in public with a service dog, because especially if you're going places where dogs aren't expected to be, you're an oddity. You stand out, even if you don't want to stand out. Even if your dog's behavior is impeccable to the point where they should be invisible, they're mythical, so they show up anyways. And that's a very difficult feeling to grapple with, and it's a very difficult feeling to get used to. And you do get used to it. It gets better with time. But it is something that is going to be an adjustment period for you and something to navigate and potentially have someone in your life that you can talk to when you're working through the early days of that. You're potentially putting yourself and your service dog in harm's way. Like I mentioned earlier, the guys who were joking about, well, I wonder what would happen if we beat up this dog. Unfortunately, those people exist. And sometimes people get very upset when you tell them they can't pet your dog. I've had people get in my face. I've had people chase us through stores. All sorts of different reactions when I tell people they can't pet my dog. And I've even had some people who just reach out. I had a store worker actually reach past me in between me and the shopping cart to try and pet Austin one day. And that was exceptionally uncomfortable because his arm was at crotch level. And stranger and just rude on so many levels. It's very odd. People they lose personal boundary respect when you have a service dog with you. And there are some people who might try to hurt you or might try to hurt your dog, and you don't know that. And I'm not saying that to scare you. I'm saying that to make you aware that it is a thing. Those people are rare, but they do exist. People who want to screw with the dog just to see what will happen, those people exist. And I hope you never encounter it, but they do exist. Pets are a threat. You will not look at dogs the same way. Once you train your own service dog and learn to appreciate what goes into training a service dog, you will not look at pet dogs the same way again. Pet dogs are a threat, even if they're not aggressive, even if they're not seemingly dangerous. If a leash dog or an off-leash dog suddenly invades your space, you don't know what that dog is going to do to your dog. But if you have a mobility issue, that dog could easily knock you off balance, get in between you and your service dog. Your service dog could lose focus and get distracted by the other dog, missing task cues, or the dog could be dangerous and could attack your service dog. And a lot of service dogs who get attacked aren't able to return to the job because then they're too hesitant around other dogs and they're not able to do their job. And it's devastating when that happens to a team because they have to, one, they're suddenly without medical assistance that they rely on. And two, they have to start over. And starting over it's devastating. It's time consuming. You have to find the right dog. You have to redo all of the training, and all the training that you put into that previous dog, it's washed away. Like a wave taking down a sandcastle. You did it. It took time. It took effort. It was magnificent. And now you can't use it anymore. You can't work with it. And if you're disabled to the point where you can't handle taking care of multiple dogs at once, you're also now faced with having to rehome this dog that you're deeply attached to, who used to be your working partner, because someone else's pet dog was dangerous and attacked your partner. So going out into a world and going out into pet-friendly locations and going into locations that aren't pet-friendly, but people try to fake their dog off as being a service dog or an ESA, who are not allowed, is very problematic. As soon as we hear barking, we're immediately like, okay, where is it? We're on the defensive. And I'm studying its body language from 50 feet away. Can we pass this dog within 6 feet? Fine. Do we need to take another path? Do we need to pull off the side if we're at the dog park, walking? Like, what do we need to do? One of the things I touched on earlier is that happy breeds can be washed from training if they are too happy. Looking at you, golden retrievers, breeds who want to be everybody's best friend can be good service dogs, but it comes down to each individual dog. So I don't want you to dismiss something like a golden retriever just because they're friendly and happy, because they do make great service dogs. If your individual dog likes other people equally or more than you, they cannot be a service dog. Service dogs need to prioritize you over other people. I'm sorry, I'm getting a very strong throat flare, but I'm going to try to keep going. Another downside of public attention, it is an invasion of your privacy. People are going to ask you intimate questions about your medical life, about your disability, about your dog, about what you do. And if you're the type of person who matches who you're talking to, it's really, really easy to accidentally tell people too much information, or to feel like you're compelled to tell people information that you don't have to tell them. A lot of times I recommend that teams come up with a stage name for their dog that they can give out to appease people. They think they know the dog's name, but they can't actually use it to distract your dog. I had a stage name for Robbie, but I do not have a stage name for Austin. And the reason is because now that I have a business, Austin is a demo dog and he is my service dog. And we go to teaching events together. And so when I teach people on the fly about CRPS and about Disabled Advantage and about Austin, I want to be authentic. I don't want to come off as being disingenuous. Another downside of public attention is that, as crappy as it is, sometimes you have to be the bigger person. Otherwise, you might be seen as the problem. And that's incredibly frustrating and ableist. And I know that. But we're constantly told by everyone, service dog organizations, trainers, myself, that we need to be professional. We need to be polite. We need to be composed. We have to avoid scrutiny. We have to avoid the cops getting called on us. We have to step just right so we don't lose our privileges of being allowed to take a service dog with us in public. Because if enough incidents happen, that could result. The sad truth of it is, especially in this current time, we don't know how the other person is going to react to us being abrasive or to us over advocating for ourselves. And so that's why things like stage names can be helpful, because we can appease someone without taking something away from ourselves. Being the bigger person might look like giving them a short answer, giving them a half-truth, giving them a stage name, being polite when we really need to go, coming up with escape phrases like, "Hey, it's been great talking with you. I'd love to answer more of your questions, but I really need to go. My disability is flaring up," and then you just walk off. A lot of times, or some of the times, when you say, "No, you can't pet my dog," or "I don't have to answer that," other people can get very upset. I generally opt for being the bigger person wherever I can. And sometimes I fail at this. And those are usually the days when I'm in a lot of pain. And my mental check goes, "Oh, crap, I shouldn't have answered that way." But I try to forgive myself because I'm human. But typically I do try to be the bigger person. What you do is entirely up to you. That's just my personal advice. Final downside. Public attention can directly interfere with tasks, whether they mean to or not. People open doors for me, which seems nice, but it robs my service dog of the opportunity to practice pushing handicap buttons to get better at it. And it's his job. He thoroughly enjoys doing it. He wants to do it for me. So when other people do it for him, he looks real sad. People trying to help me up if I fall, that's his job. That's what he's here for. When other people help me stand up, it actually hurts me worse than if the dog helped me. If I drop something in a store and I need Austin to pick it up, but somebody's standing right there trying to talk to us, they're interfering with Austin's ability to pick up something and hand it to me. It varies how public attention is going to interfere with tasks from team to team. Those are just some examples for my team. But I've had other times where I needed Austin to brace, or I needed counterbalance assistance, and people would just stop and stare at us, and we wouldn't be able to keep walking. Like, this happened especially at the zoo, is I would be holding on to Austin's harness while I was in my wheelchair so that Austin could help my husband pull the wheelchair. And people would stop and stare at us in the middle of the pathway, and then we wouldn't be able to go anywhere because they clogged up the pathway staring at us. We're in a zoo, and I was still the most interesting thing to stare at. And so stuff like that, it's just, it interferes with task work. And in a multitude of ways, if they distract you or directly trying to do the thing that the dog's trying to do. Our dogs love their jobs. They love their jobs. They genuinely get upset when they don't get to do their job. And as much as we appreciate small acts of kindness from public, we also want our dogs to be able to do their job, because that's why we have them. That's why they're out in public with us. So I have to conclude because my throat is very painful and spasming, and it's getting harder and harder to talk and breathe. But those are the ups and downs of public attention when partnered with a service dog. Thank you for listening to this question and bearing with me for my voice. If you have any questions, please send me a message or comment on the video. Thank you for listening.